This site passed every inspection it was ever given. It still failed its ISO audit. Not because the work was wrong. The work was fine. It failed on one document. A document that was supposed to prove the site was legally compliant and couldn't. That document is the compliance register, sometimes called the legal register, the record of every environmental law and commitment the project has to meet. In the next few minutes, you'll build one properly, from the first obligation to the last review date. And later, the one column auditors check first that most teams leave blank.
Here's the thing that catches teams out. The site was compliant, but the evidence that it was compliant wasn't organized, it wasn't traceable, and it wasn't current. And an auditor can't credit what you can't show them. A missing or out-of-date register doesn't read as a small gap. It reads as a systemic one. That's a major nonconformity, meaning a finding serious enough to put your certification at risk, not a minor observation you can wave away. So here's what we're building. The one document that turns "we're compliant" into "here's the proof," obligation by obligation, date by date.
So let's define it properly. A compliance register is a living record. It lists every environmental obligation the project has to meet, and a compliance obligation just means anything you're required to comply with, whether that's the law or a promise you've signed up to. And alongside each one, the proof that you're meeting it. Now that word, living. Living means it's dated, it's owned by a named person, and it's reviewed. It is not a document you write once at mobilization and file away. It's your single source of truth, linking every obligation to the environmental aspect it controls and to the person accountable for it. Under ISO 14001, Clause 6.1.3, this is exactly how you demonstrate that your obligations are identified, accessed, and applied. There's a distinction here that trips people up, so let's be clean about it. A legal requirement is a mandatory rule that comes from law, a permit, a statutory limit, a consent condition. Non-negotiable. Break one and you've broken the law, not just your own management system. A compliance obligation is the broader ISO 14001 term. It includes every legal requirement plus the voluntary commitments your organization has chosen to adopt. Client environmental specs, LEED or BREEAM credit conditions. Those are green building certification schemes. Corporate ESG pledges. And here's why the distinction matters. Auditors test both. A voluntary commitment you signed up to is auditable. It's a real obligation now, not an aspiration. So what actually qualifies as a compliance obligation? Because not everything does. The first test is applicability. It only applies if it connects to an environmental aspect your project actually has. And an environmental aspect just means a way your activity can interact with the environment, like dust or a discharge or waste. No aspect, no obligation. Then, mandatory legal obligations. National and regional environmental law, your discharge and emission permits, waste carrier licenses, consent conditions. Then, adopted voluntary ones. Certification credit requirements like LEED version 4.1, client environmental specs, corporate and ESG commitments. Now the boundary condition people get wrong. Something you could adopt but haven't, that is not yet a compliance obligation. Adoption is the trigger. And every obligation has to trace back to an interested party need. That's the chain an auditor follows. Clause 4.2 to 6.1.3 to 6.1.5.
A defensible register has 9 columns. Miss one and you've left a gap an auditor will find. Here are the first 5. 1. The obligation name and its exact legal citation. The statute or permit number itself, never just local regulations. 2. The applicable environmental aspect.
This is the physical link the auditor traces, from the paper back to the thing on site. 3. The specific requirement, the actual limit or condition. For example, PM10 at the boundary, at or below the permit's stated 24-hour mean. Not the general rule, the exact number. 4. The responsible person, a named role, not the team. 5. The evaluation method and frequency, how and how often you check compliance.
And the next 4. 6. Compliance status, current and dated, compliant, at risk, or non-compliant. 7. The evidence location, where the proof actually lives, the link or the file reference. 8. The next review or renewal date. Remember this column. It's the one auditors check first, and I'll show you why shortly. And 9. The change log. What changed, when, and by whom. That last column is what proves the register is living, not static. It's the evidence trail that the thing has actually been maintained. So that's all 9. But columns on their own are abstract. Let me show you what they look like filled in on a real project. Air quality, water discharge, noise, hazardous storage. And look at these two, a lead credit and a client specification, sitting in the same register as the legal obligations. Because once you've adopted them, that's exactly what they are. Notice something else. Not every row says compliant. One's partially compliant, one's at risk, with a corrective action reference logged against it. That's what a real register looks like mid-project. A register where every single row is green usually means nobody's actually checking. If you want this as a working template, all 9 columns, the examples, ready to adapt to your own site, email us at info@enviroverge.com and we'll send you a free copy.
So how do you actually build it? 5 steps, source to register. Step 1, identify your aspects. List everything the project touches: air, water, land, waste, noise, resources. Step 2, locate the obligations. Map each aspect to the law, the permit, and the adopted commitment that governs it. Step 3, extract the specific requirement. Pull the exact limit or condition, not the general rule, the precise one. Step 4, assign and date. Name the responsible role, set the evaluation method, the frequency, and the review date. Then step 5, log and maintain. Enter it into the register with a change log line, and at that moment, the register goes live.
Let's make it real. Mid-project, a new dust suppression permit condition lands on your desk. It says PM10, that's airborne dust, particles under 10 microns across, must be controlled at the site boundary and monitored continuously against the limit the permit sets. Now walk the 5 steps live. The aspect is airborne dust. The obligation is that permit condition. The requirement is the boundary limit, monitored in real time. The owner is the environmental officer, and it's logged with a review date. The moment that entry is in the register, with an owner and a date against it, it's defensible. Until then, it's a gap, sitting there, waiting for an auditor to find it.
Building it is half the job. Maintaining it is the other half, and it's where most registers quietly die. First, an honest point. The standard sets no fixed review frequency. It requires the register to be maintained and current, but you set the cadence, and then you're held to it. As recommended practice, a scheduled review quarterly for active sites, monthly where permit conditions are changing fast demands. But scheduled reviews aren't enough on their own. You also need trigger-based reviews. A new permit, a change in the law, a new site activity, a new commitment. Any of those forces an immediate update. You don't wait for the schedule. A new aspect on site means a new register entry the same day the activity starts. And here's the sting. A register not reviewed within its own stated cadence is itself a nonconformity. The cadence you set is the cadence you're audited against.
Now, a distinction that catches even mature teams. Holding the register, that's clause 6.1.3, means identifying and recording your obligations and what they require. It's the what you must meet. Evaluating compliance, that's a separate clause, 9.1.2, means actively checking on a defined frequency whether you actually are meeting them. It's the proof you did. And here's the trap. A complete, beautiful register with no evaluation records against it is a common major finding. You listed every obligation, but you never demonstrated you checked them. Two different clauses, tested separately. A healthy register feeds your evaluation. It does not replace it.
So where do registers actually fail audit? 5 ways, and you'll recognize at least one. First, and this is the payoff I promised you, stale renewal dates. That column 8 review date. It's the first thing an auditor checks, and an expired permit date is an instant finding. No debate. Second, local regulations written in as a citation. No statute number, no legal reference, which means it's not traceable, which means it's not defensible. Third, orphaned obligations. An entry with no linked aspect and no named owner. It exists on paper, but nothing on site actually controls it. Fourth, the copy-paste register. A generic template never tailored to this site's real aspects. It reads identically to every other project, which tells the auditor no one thought about this site. And fifth, no changelog. If you can't show what changed and when, you can't prove the register is living. And a static register fails the maintain test in 6.1.3.
There's one misclassification I want to kill completely because it's expensive. The error? Treating adopted voluntary commitments, a lead credit condition, a client's ESG spec, as nice to have, and leaving them off the register entirely. The rule? Once you've adopted it, a voluntary commitment is a compliance obligation, as auditable as any legal permit. A lead version 4.1 credit condition your project is targeting becomes an obligation the moment the project commits to that credit, not when the certificate finally arrives. That's just adoption is the trigger again, applied. So here's the clean rule to carry. If it's on your interested party register, clause 4.2, as a need you accepted, then it belongs on your compliance register, clause 6.1.3. The two connect.
Look at this for a second. The register isn't paperwork. It's your defense. One document, current and owned, standing between a clean audit and a major nonconformity. So here's your register health check. 6 points. Run your own register against these. 1. Every obligation cites an exact legal reference, no local regs. 2. Every row links to a real environmental aspect on this site. 3. Every row has a named owner and an evaluation frequency. 4. Every renewal and review date is current, none expired. That's the one auditors hit first. 5. Your adopted voluntary commitments, lead, ESG, client specs, are actually included. And 6. A changelog proves it's reviewed on its stated cadence. 6 for 6, and your register stops being a liability and starts being your strongest evidence in the room. So here's your next move. This week, start your register. Begin with those 9 columns and fill the renewal dates first. Next in this playlist, we take this exact register and put it under an internal audit, live on site. You'll watch it get tested the way a real auditor tests it. Subscribe and keep building the full ISO 14001 field guide with us. EnviroVerge, environmental knowledge, field ready.